In this lesson, we're going to be talking about ratios and proportions. A ratio is a comparison of two numbers by division. And there are three ways to represent a ratio. And the most common way is this way that you see here in the middle, 7/4. It's basically just a rational number. It's a fraction. So this is one way to represent the ratio. The other two look like this. And the way that you say it is 7/4 with that colon in between. And then you can actually put the word 2 in there if you'd like. So 7/4. The thing to really know about ratios is that you have to simplify them fully. So if you have a ratio such as 8/4, you have to simplify that down to 2/1, just like you would a regular fraction. Now, let's go ahead and move into this idea of a proportion, because it includes the idea of a ratio. A proportion is a statement of equality between two ratios. So I have two ratios, and when they're equal to one another, it creates a proportion. And one way that I can identify if two ratios create a proportion is by using these things called the cross products. So you can see that I have my cross products circled over here on the left. And so what it's actually saying is that if I were to multiply the cross products, for example, 2 times 10, that would equal 20. So what I did was I just took that little bubble there and multiplied the two numbers. And if I were to take the other two numbers and multiply them as well, 5 times 4, that's going to also give me 20. Notice how the product of both of those little pieces there are both 20. If they end up being the same number, that means that these two ratios indeed create a proportion. So what happens if you have two ratios, but one of the ratios has a missing value, like the example here below? The way that you're going to figure out that missing value is by using the cross products. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to circle my cross products. And I'm going to use that same procedure of multiplying them together. So I'm going to multiply 5 times x, and then I'm going to multiply 6 times 15. And then you can see that I'm given a regular equation. So I'm going to solve it using all those skills that we've been practicing. So 5x is equal to 90. And if I simplify this equation, I'm going to divide it both sides by 5. My missing variable x is going to be 18. So what that means is that that missing value x is going to be the number 18. And that number is going to make those two ratios equal to one another. Now, I do have a little note here on the side that I'd like you to pay attention to. The placement of the missing value does not matter as long as you use the same procedure to solve the proportion. What that means is that x that you see, it can also be in the position of the 6, the 5, or the 15. And as long as you follow that same procedure, you will end up with the same solution of x equals 18. Okay, now let's go ahead and look at a couple more proportions that are a little bit more algebraic, I would say. All right, they do look a little complex now, don't they? But we know how to solve a proportion, and we know how to use cross products. So let's go ahead and use the same method to solve these two proportions. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to circle my cross products. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply them because I'm setting it up the same way as I did the other problems. So I'm going to first start with this little bubble here. So I'm going to multiply 2, and I'm going to say times 2x. And just like before, I'm going to set that equal to the other cross product, which is this guy. And I'm going to say 6, and notice how I have x plus 7. That is a quantity. So really, I'm going to put that whole quantity in parentheses just like this. You have to do that. Because what that is now is I'm going to be using the distributive property. So let's go ahead and distribute these. So I have 4x is equal to 6x plus 42. See how everything is coming together? All the things that we've been learning in this unit are now coming together. Now we have variables on both sides, so we need to be moving the variables to get them together. So I'm going to go ahead and move 6x over to the left. Notice how I'm nice and neat and organized with my work. That's going to leave me with negative 2x, and my x's are going to cancel out, and I'm going to be left with 42. I'm going to finish off my equation by dividing both sides by negative 2. to give me a solution of negative 21. All right, and that is my missing value. So what that means is this missing value, if I were to substitute it back into the original problem for this x and this x, it would make the two ratios equal to each other, creating that proportion. And this is the only number that will create those two ratios to make them equal to one another. There is no other number that will make these two ratios satisfied. Okay, let's try another one. This one looks a little bit different now, but I'm going to use that same procedure. So I'm going to start by just circling my cross products. And that's just a really nice visual to help you remember what you're doing. Okay, now let's go ahead and rewrite the equation. This step is really important because you don't want to do any distributing in your head because the negatives will cause some confusion and cause some problems. So let's go ahead and just rewrite it. I'm going to work with this, this bubble first. So I'm going to write 5 times the quantity of b plus 3. And that's going to be equal to this other quantity, which is 4 times b minus 8. Now, if you were to reverse the order here and do the other bubble, write the other bubble first and kind of do it flip-flop, that's fine. You're still going to end up with the same solution. All right, now let's go ahead and distribute. 5b plus 15 is equal to 4b minus 32. Okay, and let's go ahead and work with my variables on both sides. I'm going to go ahead and move my 4b over to the left-hand side. That's going to leave me with 1b, but I'm just going to indicate that as b because I don't really need to write that 1 there. And I'm going to bring down my positive 15. These guys are going to eliminate, and I'm left with negative 32. Okay. All right, last step, just to finish it off here, I'm going to subtract 15 to get that b all by itself. Notice how nice and neat and organized I am. B is equal to negative 47. And that's going to be my final answer. Again, what this means, if I were to take that negative 47 and go back up into my problem and substitute it into this b and this b, it will make both of those ratios equal to one another. So it's the only number that will do that. Okay, I do have one more problem for you, and these are everybody's favorite. These are word problems, and I just want to kind of show you a really unique way to set these type of problems up that might be really helpful to you. So let me go ahead and read the problem here. Mrs. DeBaldo's iPod has 2 gigs of storage and can hold about 500 songs. A similar but larger media player at Costco has 8 gigs of storage. About how many songs can the larger media player hold? So you might be doing a little bit of math in your head, but I do want to show you how to set this up. Anytime that you're given this type of problem where you're given 3 pieces of information and you're looking for the 4th, you're setting up a proportion. So here's how I like to set it up. The first thing I like to do is write this thing called a word ratio, where you're writing down what you're comparing. So I'm going to be comparing gigabytes to the number of songs. And then let's go ahead and fill in the missing information here. Or not the missing, but the given information. So Mrs. DeBaldo has a 2 gigabytes of storage on her iPod. That's a given piece of information. So I'm going to put that number 2 in the top where I have gigabytes. Okay. Now, it also says that it can hold about 500 songs. So those 2 numbers go together. 2 gigabytes and 500 songs. So I'm going to go ahead and place that 500 songs in the bottom. Because remember, a ratio is a comparison of 2 numbers, and I'm comparing that 500 songs will fit on that 2 gigabytes. Now let's work with the other ratio. A similar but larger media player at Costco has 8 gigabytes, so I'm going to put the 8 in the numerator because that's where my G is, my word ratio. And then it says about how many, that's asking us, well, we don't know. That's a question. How many songs can the larger one hold? That's going to be X. So this is a really great way to kind of set yourself up so that you can create yourself a proportion. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take that proportion and we're going to multiply the cross products. So I have 2x is equal to 8 times 500. And 8 times 500 is going to give me 4,000. So I'm going to simplify that down. And then I'm going to simply go ahead and divide by 2. X is equal to 2,000. And the question is, well, 2,000 what? Well, if we see where the X is placed in our proportion, we can look directly across to see what we want to label this. So this is going to be about 2,000 songs. But we also knew that by the question being asked about how many songs can the larger media player hold. So that will be our solution. It is kind of fun to try to create your own word problems using proportions. So feel free here at the bottom, try to create your own and then solve it and see if you were correct. That brings us to the end of our section on ratios and proportions.